My hands were still wet from washing the dishes. The towel slipped to the floor, and I didn't bother to pick it up. Outside the door was Linda, my mother-in-law, standing ramrod straight, as if she were about to attend a board meeting. Next to her was a short man I didn't recognize, carrying a leather briefcase. One look, and I knew a notary. Exactly 7 days after the wedding. And she had brought a notary into my home to pressure me into signing papers, right in the apartment my husband and I had just moved into. 10:03 a.m. The kitchen still smelled of sweet coffee and warm pastries. I was just about to call Ethan to ask if he had bought the right almond milk I liked. Then the doorbell rang 3 times in a row, sharp and insistent. I opened the door and found a storm waiting on the other side. Linda walked in, as if this place belonged to her. No greeting, no explanation. Just Carl, an old family friend, will help with a few minor paperwork items. It's simple. Claire, do you have 5 minutes? I forced myself to stay calm and invited them in. My forced smile had barely begun to form when her next sentence slapped me in the face. We want to make sure that if anything happens between you and Ethan, the assets will be divided fairly. And most importantly, confirm that you didn't bring any property into the marriage. I heard every word, every cut. This wasn't about fairness. It was an interrogation, a way to check if I was worthy of being a Rivers daughter-in-law. Carl placed the file on the table. He avoided my eyes. I flipped through each page. One clause stood out like red letters on a white page. If either party is found to have undisclosed assets prior to the marriage, those assets will be considered marital property. I saw the trap. If I disclosed, I would lose. If I stayed silent, I could later be accused of hiding assets. I smirked. Linda looked at me, sharp as a blade. Claire, you don't have anything to hide, do you? I smiled. Nothing major. A few savings accounts, some wedding jewelry. I used to live with my grandmother, but the small apartment has already been transferred to my parents. Half truth, half lie. But enough to protect the survival of my secret. I own 3 apartments worth several $100,000. My grandmother left them to me, in my name. And no one in my husband's family knows. Because if they did, I know exactly what would happen. Linda would force me to transfer them, or pressure me to use them as family assets, or worse, force me to live by her rules. The door opened. Ethan walked in. I bought more waffles. He stopped cold. Mom, Carl, what's going on here? I looked at him. Said nothing. Just shook my head slightly. I didn't invite them. Linda spoke first. Son, I'm only trying to protect you. We need to make the finances clear. Claire just needs to sign this little agreement. Ethan looked at me, then turned to Linda. Mom, this is between me and Claire, not you. The air turned solid. Linda blinked, but she still forced a smile. Suit yourself. But you'll see, I'm only looking out for your happiness. She stood up, picked up her bag. Carl, let's go. I stood in the living room. My hands are still damp, but my back had been cold for a long time now. Only 1 week after the wedding, I realized this marriage wasn't just about love. It was a battlefield. And I, Claire Monroe, will not let anyone take what I have inherited. I couldn't sleep that night. Ethan lay beside me, his back turned toward me. His breathing was steady, peaceful, but inside me, there was a storm. I stared up at the ceiling, dark as all the things I hadn't dared to say. That feeling, the feeling of being scrutinized like some gold digger wouldn't leave me. 7 days ago, I was a bride in a white dress. 7 days later, I was a woman having to protect her own assets before anyone even asked, "Are you okay?" The next morning, I made coffee. My hands still trembled as I poured the water. I thought I was used to being strong, but this time, something felt different. Not because of Linda, not just because of that contract. It was because of Ethan. He didn't say much after what happened yesterday, just held me, gently, but silently. And in that silence, I felt lonelier than ever. I used to believe that as long as we loved each other, that was enough. That as long as we trusted each other, we could stand together against the world. But that world turned out to be his family. I don't know. If one day he finds out I've been hiding 3 apartments, will he stand by me, or will he think, turns out Mom was right. She really does have secrets. I went to work, came home, spoke just enough, smiled just enough, pretended everything was normal. But inside, I was empty. That creeping insecurity began to grow, like a crack spreading deep inside me. I feared the day Linda might discover the truth and tear me apart in front of everyone. She'd say, "I warned you. She's hiding assets. She can't be trusted." And the worst part would be if Ethan believed her. One evening, I knocked on his office door. "Ethan, does your mom bringing a notary over make you doubt me?" He looked up and smiled. "No, Claire. Mom worries too much. But I don't think you have anything to hide." I pressed my lips together, not daring to meet his eyes. I don't want money to get in the way of our relationship." "Then don't let it," he said, simple and light. But my heart wasn't light anymore. I started avoiding family gatherings. I didn't want to sit there, listening to those roundabout questions like, "So, what plans do you two have for the future, Claire? Is your job going well? Your family probably isn't very well off, right?" I'd smile, sip my tea, nod, and swallow every shred of dignity that had been scratched raw. I missed my grandmother, the woman who once told me, sometimes, silence isn't about hiding something wrong. It's about keeping the right thing for the one who deserves it. She left me 3 apartments, but she didn't leave me a way to survive among those who didn't want to see me stand on my own. I know there are people hearing this story who see themselves somewhere in it. If you've ever been judged, underestimated, or had to protect your true worth from those who don't believe in you, you're not alone. Subscribe to the Revenge Mark channel if you want to follow real stories about resilience, the value of silence, and the moments when standing up doesn't require shouting. Because sometimes, revenge doesn't need to be loud. You just need to keep what's yours and not let anyone touch it. But I knew Linda wasn't done yet. She's the kind of person who doesn't give up just because she's been turned down once. And I, Claire Monroe, couldn't keep avoiding her forever. The next time Linda showed up, it wouldn't be just to talk. What would she bring with her? And how long could Claire keep that secret? I used to think that if I stayed silent long enough, they would stop trying to find something that wasn't there. If I were kind enough, they would learn to love without suspicion. But I was wrong. 2 weeks after the day Linda brought the notary to my house, she didn't come back. Not a single phone call, not a single message, only a cold silence, like the layer of frost clinging to the car window each morning. I should have felt relieved, but instead, I felt uneasy, because I knew the type of person Linda was. She never withdrew, and she pulled back to calculate. On Sunday evening, Ethan and I were invited to his parents' house for dinner. The meal was full of dishes she knew I didn't like. Her words were gentle, but her eyes were probing. "Claire, how's work been for you lately? Consulting? Right, the kind of thing that's up and down, isn't it?" I smiled. I didn't argue. I swallowed the raw greens as if I were swallowing my discomfort. Ethan sat next to me, casually pouring more sauce for his mother. After dinner, Linda invited me out to the back porch for some fresh air. I followed her because refusing would only make her cling tighter. The air was crisp. She crossed her arms, not looking at me, and simply said, "Do you know why I'm worried? Assets, Claire. In a family, those things have to be clear." I stayed silent. She tilted her head, looking at me strangely. "Let's say, One day you're no longer in Ethan's life. What would you take with you? The question wasn't to find out. It was to warn, to intimidate. I looked her straight in the eye. If you think I'd leave, then you never believed I would stay. That night, when I got home, I opened the file cabinet. The copy of my grandmother's will was still neatly placed inside a black leather folder, clean and pristine. 3 apartments. Each is in a different neighborhood, all purchased when she was young. Just in case you need options. Now I understood. A beautiful home isn't the one with the most furniture. It's the one where no one has the right to force you to stay. Linda wanted me to live the way she mapped out. What to eat, where to live, how to hand over assets. She didn't ask. She only needed to control. The next morning, I got a call from Elizabeth, my cousin on my mother's side, who works in design and real estate. Do you still have those apartments your grandmother left you? The market's up. You might want to think about renting them out or selling. I smiled. I haven't touched them, and I don't plan on letting anyone know. She laughed. Sounds like you know how to protect yourself. After that call, I started thinking, not about selling, but about rights. I had been too obedient, too polite, too easygoing. Linda wasn't afraid of someone who stayed silent. She was afraid of someone who knew exactly what they held in their hands. That night, I opened my laptop. I logged into my property management account. I checked each lease renewal date. I called my grandmother's old lawyer to ask about prenuptial confidentiality clauses. Every click of the mouse felt like one more step I took out from under Linda's shadow. I didn't tell Ethan, not because I didn't trust him, but because it was time for me to step out of someone else's light and turn on my own. The next day, Linda sent me a short message. Are you free for tea this afternoon? I want to show you some family documents. I read it over and over. No need to read between the lines. Her meaning was clear. Either I tell her everything, or she will find out. I sat up straight. For the first time in weeks, I didn't feel shaky. I didn't feel anxious. I only felt that I was holding the knife in my own hand. Was that afternoon tea going to be a conversation or a declaration of war? And me, was I truly ready to face it? That afternoon, I went to Linda's house, not because I wanted to, but because I had to. I was no longer going there as a daughter-in-law, trying to please. I went as a woman who knew if I didn't hold on to control, someone else would decide my fate for me. She opened the door. Her smile was just warm enough to be polite. Her eyes just sharp enough to scrutinize. Claire, you're here. I just brewed some tea, the kind you like. I knew she never actually remembered what I liked, but I didn't bother to point it out. We sat down at the table. She handed me a stack of documents. These are the family's records, Ethan's assets, his father's assets, and the things I think you should know. I flipped through a few pages, just to be polite. I think these matters should be for Ethan to decide. You're his wife now, you should know, and you should share. I lifted my head and looked her straight in the eye. Are you suggesting we share, or that you control? The air froze for just a second, but it was obvious. Linda exhaled slowly, giving a faint smile. Claire, I just want to make sure that when Ethan gives you everything, you won't be hiding anything from him either. A reminder, a subtle nudge toward the secret I was keeping. That night, when I got home, I opened my laptop and went through every rental contract, reviewing each transfer clause. I began to feel different, no longer the timid Claire. I had started to prepare. In the following weeks, I worked more than usual, but not at the office. I researched the real estate market, found my own lawyer, updated the management rights for all 3 apartments to a secure digital platform with 2-factor authentication. I changed the way I dressed, nothing flashy, but with a deliberate touch, not to earn Linda's respect, but I wanted to remind myself that I was no longer the girl who nodded at everything just to keep the peace. I learned to answer sarcastic questions with silence. I learned to keep a calm face when Linda casually mentioned girls who have nothing usually cling to successful men. I knew she was talking about me, but I no longer reacted because I was taking the long way around, and she still thought I was standing still. Ethan didn't notice the change, or if he did, he didn't ask. He was still gentle, still cooked dinner every Friday, still held me while we watched movies. But I no longer told him everything, not because I didn't love him, but because I was learning to stand on my own without falling. One day, Elizabeth called. "You still haven't rented out that lakeside apartment yet, right?" "No, I have a friend, a young couple looking for that kind of place, trustworthy, want to meet them." I thought for a moment. "Send her information to me, but don't mention that I'm the owner." I met with my private broker, showed him the property portfolio. "Keep everything under the corporate name, no public records. No one needs to know who the owner is." He nodded. "Are you protecting yourself from family or from the government?" I smiled without answering. When I got home, Ethan was playing the piano. I sat down beside him, rested my head on his shoulder, and for the first time in weeks, my heart felt at ease, because I knew I was ready. I didn't think I would make my move this soon. I was still in the nesting stage, quietly reinforcing my position, quietly observing. But then Linda, she forced my hand. It was Wednesday night. Ethan had just left for a 3-day business trip. I came home late after meeting a potential tenant Elizabeth had introduced me to. Everything went well. The young couple was polite and straightforward, and they were exactly the kind of people I liked. I had just hung up my coat when my phone buzzed with a text from Linda. "Claire, I stopped by the house to pick up a few things from the keepsake cabinet. Since you weren't home, I let myself in with the spare key. I'm sure you don't mind." I slammed the wooden cabinet door shut, not out of anger, out of disappointment. I had forgotten. This apartment was still under Ethan's father's name, and Linda still had a spare key. She didn't need permission. She didn't need to ask. She simply informed me, as if I were just temporarily renting the place. The next morning, I called a locksmith. I replaced the entire system, from a mechanical lock to an electronic fingerprint lock, installed a doorbell camera, and sent one single text message. "Mom, starting today, we've changed the locks for better security. If you'd like to visit, I'd be happy to have you. But I think it's best to knock first, like everyone else. Not long, not harsh, but enough to draw the boundary." Linda didn't respond. One day, then 2, then 3. By Saturday, when Ethan got home, she finally texted, "Your father and I are thinking about upgrading to a house out in the suburbs. We're considering the Madison Avenue area. I heard there might be some units available near the park. Has Claire heard anything?" I froze. The penthouse near the park was exactly where I had just signed a rental agreement. Linda was fishing. She must have caught wind of something, or someone mentioned it in passing, and now she was casting her first line. I sat across from Ethan at dinner. The pasta on my plate had gone cold. "Something on your mind?" he asked, setting down his fork. I shrugged. "It's just, I don't feel like I truly have a home yet. This apartment is still in your father's name, and your mom comes and goes whenever she wants." Ethan sighed. "I know, I don't like it either, but it's the house my parents gave us." "But they didn't give it to me," I said plainly, soft but firm. "Have you ever thought, if one day I told you I wanted to move to a place I choose, in my name, with full control, how would you react?" He stayed silent. I didn't need an answer, because I already knew. I needed to do something to make Linda understand I had options, and I would use them if she crossed the line again. A few days later, I sent the realtor a listing for one of the 3 apartments, a small studio, the least valuable one. No public mention of my name, no announcement to anyone. But I made sure word of it would reach Linda. And just as I expected, one afternoon, Elizabeth called. "Claire, did you put the little studio on Cedar Street up for sale? Linda asked me about it this morning." I didn't say a word, but she looked at me like she wanted to read every breath I took. I laughed. Let her guess. I wasn't lying. I just didn't confirm. And sometimes, the space between those 2 things is the most powerful weapon of all. Linda had smelled smoke, but could she find the fire? An undercurrent never lasts forever. It always has a breaking point, a sudden splash at the surface, a moment when everyone looks up and sees it clearly. The war has begun. For me, that moment came on a Monday morning. I walked into the kitchen, ready to make coffee as usual. Ethan was already there, holding his iPad, his eyes deep in thought. "Claire." His voice dropped lower than usual. "Are you selling the condo on Cedar Street?" I froze for a moment. No evasion, no pretending. "Yes." He looked up, his face unreadable. "And you were just not going to tell me? Why should I?" I answered, my voice soft but firm. "It's an inheritance property. I've never hidden that from you. I just didn't share early." "What about the others? How many more condos do you have?" "Claire." I looked at him, looked deeper than the question itself. "I have 3. And I kept quiet. Not because I wanted to deceive you, but because I didn't want them to become part of your family's assets." He leaned back in his chair, silent, maybe trying to piece together all the fragments. I didn't blame him, but I wasn't going to apologize either, because from the moment Linda stepped into my life with a notary, I knew if I didn't protect what's mine, no one else would do it for me. Ethan didn't argue. He simply nodded. "I just need some time." I nodded back. "I understand." I went to the office, but my mind couldn't hold on to any report. My phone buzzed. A text from Elizabeth. "Linda just called. She asked about the realtor listing the Cedar condo. She said, if it's her daughter-in-law's property, at the very least, she has the right to know before outsiders do." I let out a cold laugh. Right, Linda has always believed that anything related to me automatically relates to her. That evening, Linda called me directly. "Claire, I want to meet. Family matters shouldn't be known to outsiders first. Whatever you want to say, just say it now." Her voice rose slightly. "You've been hiding things. And now you're selling without asking anyone. Do you understand what this makes the whole family look like?" I closed my eyes and took a deep breath. "No, because this is my business, not the family's." She was quiet for a few seconds. Then she dropped the line. "You think you're clever, but don't forget this family has its own ways of protecting itself." The next day, Ethan was called to meet with his parents. I didn't go, and he didn't suggest I go with him. That evening, he came home, said nothing, just sat down, took off his shoes, and let out a long sigh. My parents said, "You can't be trusted to be secretive, and one day, you'll take everything and leave." I looked at him, said nothing, because I knew if I had to explain myself to my own husband, I had already lost. "What are you planning to do with the other 2 condos?" "Keep them, and I won't be asking anyone's permission to do so." He nodded. No objection, no support either. I knew I had stepped out of the safe zone. Linda was no longer playing in the shadows. She was gathering her allies. I began to hear whispers from my in-laws. The old compliments vanished. Only watchful, measuring eyes remained. But I didn't back down, because after that first blow, I had already seen the true face of family. Linda had made her move. But what would she do next? And Ethan? Where would he stand when the battle lines became unmistakably clear? Friday, Ethan came home late, his whole demeanor heavy. I knew he had just been through one of Linda's so-called family meetings, full of insinuations, manipulations, and accusations. We didn't talk. There was no need. At this point, there was already a distance between us that neither of us dared to name. I went into my office and locked the door. On the screen, the spreadsheet clearly showed the rental income coming in from 2 of my apartments. I didn't need much. I just needed enough stability so I wouldn't be shaken. That night, I sent an email to my personal attorney, confirming the formation of a limited liability company in my name, a company that would own all of my current real estate assets. I named it Cedar Line Holdings, a name no one would think twice about, but to me, it was the first wall of protection. 3 days later, Linda dropped by again. No appointment, but this time, she couldn't get in. The door stayed closed, new locks, the doorbell rang, the camera lit up. I sat inside, watching the image of her standing outside, knocking lightly, as if teaching someone a lesson. I opened the door. Linda stepped in with a fake smile. "Oh, Claire, I had some free time today, so I thought I'd bring you some cookies. I hope I'm not disturbing you." I kept my tone even. "Not at all. But next time, please let us know in advance. We have new locks now." She gave a small laugh. "Security system." I looked straight into her eyes. "Protection against people who think they have the right to walk into someone's home without knocking." She went silent, just for a second. Then she changed the subject. "Oh, I heard. You just started a company, Cedar Line Holdings." I nodded. "Just a small thing." She tried to keep her composure, but I could clearly see the slight twitch in her facial muscles. Linda had lost the trail. I had moved my assets beyond her reach legally. That evening, I invited Elizabeth over for dinner. She brought along the renovation plans for the penthouse near the park. Fresh, modern, sleek. I had decided I would move there. "Are you sure?" Elizabeth asked. "Leaving this place means officially separating yourself from your husband's family." I nodded. "I'm not running away. I'm choosing not to live within walls that have ears." A week later, I sent a notice to Ethan's parents. "Ethan and I will be moving to a new place. The apartment is owned by Cedar Line Holdings. We hope you will respect our privacy." No explanations, no asking for permission, just a polite announcement. Linda didn't respond, but I heard she smashed a glass vase in her living room. Ethan stayed silent throughout the entire moving process. I wasn't sure if he supported me, but at least he didn't stop me. We arrived at the new apartment on a Monday morning. The sun was soft. I stood in the middle of the living room, looking out through the wide glass windows. No one had a key except me and Ethan. No uninvited high heels clicking in the hallway. No forced cookies. No prying eyes. For the first time, I felt like I was in a space that truly belonged to me. But that night, Ethan sat down beside me, his voice low. "Can you tell me, is there anything else you're hiding from me?" I looked at Ethan. His question still hung in the air. "Is there anything else you're hiding from me?" My chest tightened. I had thought moving out on our own would bring us closer together. But maybe the real distance was in the fact that he no longer knew what he could believe. "Everything I've hidden out of fear," I said, trying to keep my voice from trembling, afraid of being seen as calculating, afraid your mother would force me to let go, and afraid of losing you. Ethan didn't answer. He just quietly stood up, walked into his study, and closed the door. The next morning, I received an email from the university's administrative office, where Ethan worked as a senior lecturer. The message was brief. We have been informed of a possible lack of transparency regarding undeclared personal income from a family member of a faculty member. Please provide confirmation regarding the ownership status of any assets that may be related to the Research Support Fund. I read it over 3 times. Someone had sent an anonymous complaint. The allegations weren't exactly wrong, but they weren't right either. The property was mine. It had nothing to do with Ethan, nothing connected to the university's budget, but all it took was a rumor for his reputation to be smeared. I called my lawyer. We have to clear everything up. I won't let some vague accusation damage my husband. On the other end, he nodded. You have documentation proving your financial independence. This can be resolved. But you should know whoever did this knows the system well enough to play this kind of move. I didn't have to guess. There was only one person petty enough, hurt enough, and calculating enough to know Ethan's weak spot and strike like this. Linda, I tried to stay calm in the days that followed, but Ethan didn't. He came home later, spoke less. He no longer asked about my work, didn't look at me for long like he used to. One evening, as I was clearing the dishes, he quietly said, "Do you think, if you had told me everything from the start, things would be different?" I set the glass down in the sink. If I had told you everything from the start, would that apartment still be mine now? My question was like a double-edged sword, and I knew it cut into both of us. The next morning, I opened my laptop. There was an email from the university confirming that there was no issue with Ethan's income. Everything had been cleared. I let out a sigh of relief, but the relief wasn't complete, because I knew Linda wasn't trying to destroy me through my assets. She was trying to divide Ethan and me from the inside. A few days later, I attended a birthday party for an old friend. Ethan didn't come. He said he was busy working at the university. I came home a little after 9 that night. The door was unlocked, the lights were on, and my mother-in-law's voice floated from the living room. "Claire, I'm just here for a visit. Ethan invited me over for some tea. Family matters are best handled within the family." I stood behind the door, hearing Linda's soft laughter drifting from the living room. A chill ran down my spine. Not because she was here, but because Ethan was the one who had invited her in. I stepped inside, slowly. Linda turned her head, her smile sweet as syrup. "Claire, I'm sorry for not letting you know ahead of time, but Ethan said, I'm always welcome here." I looked over at him. Ethan avoided my eyes. He just lifted his teacup and drank, as if it held all the answers. That evening, Linda left. It was just me and the silence. Ethan didn't explain. I didn't ask. Sometimes, you already know the answer. You just don't have the courage to hear it spoken out loud. The next day, I didn't go to work. I sat in the kitchen all day, my hands resting on the table, doing nothing, just staring at the empty chair across from me, wondering, what did I do wrong? I used to think that keeping quiet was the wisest way to protect the things I loved. Now I'm not so sure. Maybe it was that very silence that created the distance, that made Ethan feel pushed away, that gave Linda the opening she needed to step in. That afternoon, I walked to our old apartment, the place Ethan and I once lived. I stood outside, looking up at the second-floor balcony. A piece of my life I had once thought was our home, now felt like it belonged to strangers. The door was still painted white. The hanging flower pots I had put up were still there, but no one was watering them. I broke down, not out loud, just hot tears streaming silently down my face. I had once been so sure about myself, about Ethan, about the boundaries between me and Linda, but now everything was blurring. I came back home at dusk. Ethan was cooking dinner, grilled fish, the dish he knew I loved. The smell filled the kitchen, but I felt nothing. No hunger, no joy, No sense of safety. You're home, he said, without turning around. I nodded. We ate dinner in silence. Every clink of the knife and fork against the plates felt like it was striking my heart. After the meal, I sat on the sofa, looking out at the city lights. Ethan came out, sat next to me, but didn't touch me. I don't know what you're thinking anymore, he said quietly. I used to believe we were on the same team, but lately, you seem like you're fighting against the whole world, including me. I turned to him, my eyes blurred with tears. I'm not trying to fight anyone. I just don't want to be controlled anymore. He looked at me, longer than usual, but he didn't respond. He just stood up, went into the bedroom, and closed the door behind him. I sat there alone, my hand clutched the thin blanket over my lap. For the first time in many months, I wasn't thinking about Linda. I wasn't thinking about assets. I wasn't thinking about strategy. I was thinking only about one question. If I lose Ethan, then what would defeating Linda even mean? The next morning, I woke up in an apartment that felt almost foreign. Ethan had left early. On the table was a cup of cold coffee and a sticky note, I have class. Back at noon. No exclamation mark, no heart. I folded the note and put it away in a drawer, not because I wanted to keep it, but because I wasn't ready to throw it away. I spent the morning cleaning. Not because the place was dirty, but because my mind needed to be clear. Every glass, every drawer. I wiped as if I were scrubbing away something invisible. Anger, resentment, coldness, fatigue. Around noon, there was a knock at the door. I opened it, surprised to see Ethan's father was standing there, one hand holding a paper bag, the other clutching a baguette. Linda's out, so today I get to sneak away. I laughed, just a small sound, but genuine. He stepped inside, sat down in a chair, and exhaled, like he had just set down a heavy load. I don't know what you need to hear right now, but if it were me, I'd do exactly what you're doing. I froze. What do you mean keeping your assets, keeping your voice, and keep your distance from Linda? He shrugged. I didn't do that. And that's why I'm this quiet now. I looked at him, and for a moment, I saw myself reflected in that man, once accommodating, once enduring. I'm not sure there's anything left to save, I said quietly. You don't have to save everything. He lifted his head, his gaze gentle. You just have to not abandon yourself. After he left, I sat alone. My hand rested on the table, this time without trembling. I opened my laptop, pulled up the plan I had written the day Linda brought the notary to our home. I had once titled the file Plan B. Now I changed it to Begin Again. I called Elizabeth. Do you know anyone who can help me appraise my entire asset portfolio? Yes. What are you planning? Planning to make sure no one takes it without me knowing how to get it back. I emailed my lawyer, asked them to review the prenuptial agreement, though it had never been signed, and check any legal obligations that might arise if Ethan sought asset division in the event of a divorce. I didn't want that to happen, but for the first time, I wasn't afraid of it. That evening, I sat by the window, city lights stretching long across the glass. I opened my phone, pulled up my notes app, and made a list. What I want to keep, self-respect, the right to decide, Ethan. If he's still my Ethan, grandma in everything I do. If you've ever been hurt by the very people who were supposed to protect you. If you've ever had to stay silent just to hold on to a sliver of freedom for yourself. I want to tell you, you are not walking alone. Follow the journey on Revenge Mark, where we learn to stand up on our own 2 feet. The next morning, Ethan looked over at me as I was brushing my hair. He spoke softly. You've changed. I didn't turn around, just smiled. No, I've just become myself again. There was a strange silence inside me that whole week. Not the peaceful kind, but the stillness of someone about to step into battle, fully aware that there is no turning back. I woke up at 6 every morning, drank my coffee in silence. No more checking social media, no reading the news. I spent the first hour of each morning just thinking, not thinking about Linda, but what would I do if tomorrow were my last day to make my own decisions. I made a detailed list of my assets, categorizing them by value, liquidity, and legal sensitivity. I worked with 3 different people, a financial advisor, a divorce attorney, and an independent real estate specialist who had nothing to do with Elizabeth. None of them knew the full story. Only I knew how to piece everything together. I reopened all my old emails with Linda, the insinuations, the demands, even the voice recordings of her that I had saved out of pure self-preservation. Part of me found it amusing. Part of me felt a chill down my spine. I had grown used to the way she spoke, the way a manipulator uses a soft tone to stab someone in the heart. Now, listening again, I wasn't afraid anymore. Ethan remained quiet. We didn't argue. But we weren't as close as before. Some evenings, we would sit down to dinner together, listen to music, and watch an old movie. But between us, there was always something left unsaid. I knew he was waiting, and I was also waiting for him to ask outright. One evening, I left a folder on the dining table. I didn't try to hide it. I didn't offer it either. He saw it, opened it, read every page, assets, documents, independent agreements, company names, tenants, legal representatives. When he finished reading, he didn't ask me a single question. He simply closed the folder, looked at me, and said, "You've prepared for everything, even if I'm no longer here." I nodded, because if I don't prepare, by then, I'll have nothing left. The next morning, I sent Linda an email inviting her to lunch at a French restaurant. Not at home, not in her territory. No husband, no relatives, just her and me. A lunch that wasn't about family. It was a direct meeting. I chose a table by the window. Sunlight streamed through the glass of water. Linda arrived 10 minutes late, wearing a gray suit and the same high heels I had seen her wear to my wedding. No smile. Good. She sat down, straight-backed. "What do you want?" I took a sip of tea. "Nothing." I placed an envelope on the table. Inside are all the legal documents regarding my personal assets. Independently verified. Nothing connected to Ethan. Even in the event of a divorce. Linda gave a short, scornful laugh. "Are you threatening me?" "No," I replied calmly. "I'm ending whatever last bit of control you think you still have." She clenched her hands into fists, her nails pressing into her palms. "You think I'll just sit back and let you run wild?" I smiled slightly. "I don't need you to sit back. I just need you to understand, the game is over." Will Linda retreat? Or will she deliver one final blow to try and turn the tables? 3 days after that afternoon, Linda went completely silent. No phone calls, no messages, no knocking on my door, no accidental drop-bys like she usually did. No one said it out loud, but I knew the whole family was holding its breath, because when Linda was quiet, that was when she was calculating her next move. I got a message from Elizabeth. "Someone I know says Linda is trying to buy back the penthouse near the park, the one you're living in. She's going through an intermediary, not using her name." I sighed, not out of fear, but out of pity. She was used to controlling people by holding the keys to the space they lived in. Now that she couldn't take power from Ethan, she wanted to seize my home turf. That night, I sat in the kitchen, my hand twisting the tablecloth tight. Ethan sat across from me, his face strung as tight as a wire. "I know Mom is trying to buy this place," he said. I nodded. "Elizabeth already told me. So what are you going to do?" I looked straight at him. I'm not going to do anything, because I don't need to. This place already belongs to Cedar Line Holdings. She's not going to sell to anyone who can't identify the actual owner. Ethan exhaled, a mix of relief and unease crossing his face. Do you think Mom will stop? No, I said, my voice calm to the point of being cold. She won't stop until she's lost everything. The next morning, I woke up early. Standing in front of the mirror, I didn't put on elaborate makeup, just a deep-toned lipstick and a neat bun. The eyes staring back at me weren't those of someone on the defensive anymore. They were the eyes of someone ready to strike back. By noon, I was at the notary's office with my lawyer. I had prepared a property authorization agreement stating that even in the event of a divorce, all premarital real estate assets would not be subject to division. The lawyer looked at me and asked, "Are you sure this is extremely disadvantageous if the other party doesn't demand a split?" I nodded. This is the only way to prove I'm not holding on out of fear. I'm holding on because I have to. And I'm protecting Ethan, even if he's no longer sure he wants to stand beside me. That evening, I came home earlier than usual. Ethan was in the kitchen, setting bowls of noodles on the table. He looked at me and saw the folder in my hands. I set the stack of papers in front of him. This is the property authorization agreement. I've signed it. It's notarized. No one forced me. Ethan stared at me, reading each page carefully. His hands trembled slightly. You didn't have to do this. I cut him off, but I needed to, so I'd be clear about my own heart. We sat in silence as the apartment darkened with the setting sun outside the glass. I turned to him. In 2 days, Mom's invited the whole family to dinner at the old estate. She sent the invite through my cousin. It clearly says, family gathering to clear up all misunderstandings. Ethan closed his eyes. I don't want us to explode in front of the entire family. I smiled soft, but sharp. Don't worry, I'm not going there to explode. I stood, cleared the dishes, and placed each one gently in the sink. Then I turned to look at him for a long moment. I'm going there to end it. 2 days from now, the final dinner. The story would either close or blow up. The question was, who would be the one to lose everything that afternoon? The sky was gray, like a question mark hanging in the air. The car stopped in front of my in-laws' mansion, the place I once entered, wearing a white wedding dress, my heart full of hope. Today, I was returning, with legal documents in my bag and clarity in my heart. Ethan sat beside me. His hand was cold. His whole body was as silent as stone. You don't need to say anything, I whispered. Just don't turn away when I stand up. He nodded, a slow nod, but a true one, inside. The lights glowed warm and bright. Everyone was already seated around the table. Linda sat at the head of the table, dressed in a silver gray silk blouse and a pearl necklace around her neck. She stood, raised her glass of white wine, her lips forming a perfect smile. Thank you all for coming. Today is not about blaming anyone. It's about clearing up misunderstandings, about keeping our family together. I smirked. Keeping the family together. It sounded like the words of someone who once burned the house down, now pretending to be the firefighter. The meal went on in forced politeness. No one spoke loudly. Every clink of knife and fork against the plates rang sharp in the air. I waited until dessert. When everyone thought the meal was about to end, I stood up. My eyes swept the table, then settled on Linda. I have a few things to say. Linda set her spoon down. Her smile was no longer whole. Could you say it privately after dinner? I shook my head. I've kept things private for far too long, and I nearly lost myself because of it. I placed a copy of the legal documents on the table. I didn't say much. I didn't ramble. This is the full record of all assets I owned before marriage, verified independently, legal. and not connected in any way to Ethan or this family. Linda pressed her lips together. Are you afraid of getting divorced? I looked straight at her. No, I'm not afraid of divorce. I'm afraid of living in a marriage where people think they can bribe, control, or threaten me with family blood ties. The whole table went silent. I turned to Ethan. I don't need you to defend me, but I need you to know I never want to be a liar. And if you think I've become one, then I'm ready to walk away. Ethan looked at me. His eyes were pained. But he didn't leave. He didn't pull his hand away. Linda let out a soft, dry laugh. All right then, I have something to say, too. She stood. From her handbag, she pulled out a stack of printed papers. This is proof that Claire secretly kept 3 inherited apartments, that my daughter-in-law quietly transferred assets into a private company to avoid sharing with her husband. I nodded. Correct. And legal. And in every transaction, Ethan has never received a single cent. She froze for a second. She hadn't expected me not to deny it. So you admit you're selfish. Linda's voice tightened. I stepped toward her. Each step is steady. Then I leaned in, my voice low, like a blade sliding across a glass table. No, I admit I've learned how to survive when I've been pushed into a corner. And if you think keeping what my grandmother left me is selfish, then I intend to keep being selfish. The room went deathly still. Then Ethan's father tapped his wine glass. That's enough. He looked at the 2 women before him, one hardened by survival, the other bitter from losing control. Then he turned to Ethan. And you, Ethan, where do you stand? Ethan stood up. The entire room seemed to hold its breath. He looked at his mother. Then he looked at me. And then he said, I choose Claire. Not because I'm taking sides, but because this is the woman I married, the woman I promised to protect. Linda gave a soft, bitter laugh. So you're going to let this woman take the whole family away from you? Ethan shook his head. No one is taking me away. But if I have to choose between love and control, then I know where I belong. I said nothing. I didn't take his hand. I didn't nod in gratitude, because I knew that answer wasn't for me. It was for himself. After all those months of being pulled in 2 directions, we left the mansion in silence. On the way home, no one spoke. Only the sound of the wind brushing against the windows and the fading golden light spilling across the glass. I looked outside. Instead of feeling victorious, I felt empty. I thought that once I exposed Linda, once I reclaimed everything, I would feel relieved. But it turns out, revenge doesn't bring peace. It's only a necessary ending to a chapter that could no longer be stretched any further. That night, Ethan made tea and placed it in front of me. Do you regret it? He asked, his eyes still fixed on the steaming cup. I shook my head. No, but I'm sad. Because of my mother, I gave a faint smile. No, because I lost myself for a while. I let fear take the lead. I reacted instead of choosing. He didn't say another word. He just reached across and took my hand. A gentle squeeze, not binding, not rescuing. Just, I'm still here. A few weeks later, Linda moved back to her old house on the outskirts, the one she had once planned to renovate for early retirement. No one mentioned buying back the apartment I was living in. Elizabeth told me. I heard she no longer goes to the women's club meetings. No more parties. No one is over at her house. I stayed quiet, not happy, not sad, just finished. One afternoon, I was walking through the small market near my home when I saw an elderly woman struggling to pull her flower cart up the curb. I stopped and helped her push it up. She smiled at me, her wrinkled face lighting up. Thank you, dear. Meeting a kind person at the right time is a great blessing. I chuckled softly. I'm not sure I'm a kind person. She winked. Kind people don't have to be perfect. They just need to know where they're headed. That evening, I opened my cabinet and took out my grandmother's photo, the one I had hidden away for so long. Unable to face it, I placed it on the table beside a small candle. "I've kept everything you left me," I whispered. "But I've also learned, even if you keep something, it doesn't mean it stays whole." I stood up and went into the bedroom. Ethan was reading. I climbed into bed and turned toward him. "What are we doing tomorrow?" He turned to me, half smiling. "No meetings, no parties, no one's house. I'm thinking of taking you to the beach." I nodded. "We need the beach." I closed my eyes. My breathing is steady. The wound was still there, but something had softened, not because everything was over, but because I had finally seen the true cost of justice. That morning, the beach was empty. The waves lapped gently, just enough to hear the soft crunch of sand beneath my feet. I walked along the shore, my linen dress fluttering in the breeze. Ethan followed behind, silent. Nothing was said, but everything had already been said. I can't remember the last time I saw a blue sky without feeling heavy inside. Maybe it was before I signed the marriage certificate. Maybe it was the first time I heard Linda's heels clicking behind me in the kitchen. Whenever it was, today, for the first time, I was no longer looking back. We sat down on a rocky ledge. The ocean wind whipped my hair, salty on my lips. I turned to Ethan. "Do you think we've gone too far?" He was silent for a moment. Then he said, "No, but I think we can't go back to who we used to be." I nodded. "I don't want to go back either. I want to move forward. But this time, I won't let anyone lead me by the hand." We went back to the city that afternoon. I rearranged the bookshelves, put the photo albums in order, deleted old notes with lawyers' addresses, notary appointments, and asset tracking links, not because I didn't need them anymore, but because I no longer needed to obsess over them. I decided to send an email. "Recipient Linda, just one line: I hope you're well. I don't hope you'll understand. I just hope you'll stop." I wasn't expecting a reply. We didn't need a perfect ending. We just needed an ending. A month later, I started a new job as a strategic consultant for a real estate fund focused on independent women. No one there cared about whose wife I used to be or whose daughter-in-law I was. They only asked, "Have you ever had to stand up on your own?" And I answered yes, more than once. On my first morning at work, I looked in the mirror. No heavy makeup, no wary eyes, just me as me, and that was enough. Ethan stayed. We didn't move back to the old house. We didn't redo our honeymoon. We took walks, drank tea, argued about where to put the TV remote, and every time it happened, I knew I was living in a real marriage, one without anyone standing in between. One evening, he took me out to the balcony. The air was cool. The city glowed golden with lights. He held my hand and said softly, "I used to think being strong meant not needing anyone. But after everything, I've learned being strong is knowing who's worth holding on to." I looked at him, said nothing, but inside, I knew at last, I no longer had to hold it all alone. I still kept the 3 apartments, still signed contracts through Cedar Line Holdings. But now, I don't keep them for protection. I kept them because they were proof I had survived. Not because someone gave them to me, not because someone taught me how, but because I learned on my own. That night, I lit the candle by my grandmother's photo. I don't know if you ever took revenge on anyone, but I know you never let anyone define you. And today, as I stepped out the door, wearing my coat, holding my briefcase, fastening the last button, I knew it wasn't Linda, it wasn't Ethan, it wasn't a piece of paper, it was Claire, the only one who could redefine my life. Justice doesn't always bring complete happiness, but it brings something even more important: the freedom to start again. Some journeys don't need an audience, as long as you know you've truly lived. Claire didn't win by being ruthless. She won by staying clear-headed, by holding on to herself after the storm. If you've ever been underestimated, controlled, or had to fight just to be yourself, remember you're not alone. We don't live to seek revenge, but sometimes, revenge is the only way to reclaim respect. If this story touched something inside you, leave a comment, share it with someone who needs to hear it, and don't forget to subscribe to Revenge Mark, where every silenced voice will be told again, clearly, powerfully, and with the dignity it deserves, because silence is no longer